So today, we're going to dive into a pretty fascinating framework for understanding reality. It's this system that claims it can actually measure consciousness and truth itself. Yeah, it's a bold idea, and it all starts with a really startling diagnosis of the world we're living in right now.
Right off the bat, the speaker hits us with this incredible claim. He's saying that the collective consciousness of all of humanity, and of America specifically, is literally dropping. And he presents these numbers not as, his opinion, but as real, calibrated data points on a very specific scale.
Now, you might look at those drops and think, okay, 4 points, 6 points, what's the big deal? But he stresses that this scale is logarithmic. That means even a tiny drop like that represents a huge loss of intrinsic power and integrity. So, of course, the big question is, why? What's causing this decline?
Well, the speaker points the finger not at politics, not at economics, but at the rise of a single, really powerful idea that he says has seeped into pretty much every corner of our modern culture.
And that idea is relativism. The belief that there's no such thing as absolute truth, that my truth is just as good as your truth. The speaker comes right out and says this is a kind of narcissism, where truth just becomes whatever you want it to be, which completely undermines the whole concept of integrity itself.
And to really drive this home, he makes a pretty shocking claim. On his scale, the number 200 is the line in the sand. It's the baseline for truth and integrity. But he says that modern American academia, which you'd think would be a bastion of truth, now calibrates below 200. He sees this as a major crisis. Which, of course, leads to the question that I'm sure has been on your mind this whole time. How in the world can anyone claim to measure something as abstract and, personal as truth or consciousness and slap a number on it?
This is where we get to the absolute heart of his work. It's a system he calls consciousness calibration. He uses this great analogy to explain how he came across it. He says, think about Alexander Fleming. He accidentally saw some mold-killing bacteria in a petri dish, but he was smart enough to see what it meant, and that led to penicillin. The speaker claims a similar kind of chance observation showed him a way to tell the difference between what's true and what's false.
So, what is it exactly? Well, it's presented as this totally objective system that can measure the actual energy level of anything. A person, a statement, a book, an idea, on that logarithmic scale from 1 to 1,000. And this isn't about what you think about something. It's supposedly a direct measurement of its inherent power and truth. Okay, so using this calibration tool, the speaker says we can see two completely different paths that people take when they're searching for understanding. There's the path of the intellect, and then there's the path of wisdom. The intellectual path? Well, its poster child is someone like Albert Einstein, who calibrates at an incredibly high 499. This is pretty much the peak of human reason and raw genius.
Sir Isaac Newton also calibrates at 499, but here's where it gets really interesting. His work, the whole Newtonian cause and effect universe, that calibrates lower in the mid-400s. And the speaker's explanation is that Newton himself was higher because he was this deeply spiritual person, which shows that your own inner state can actually transcend your greatest work. So you can think of the 400s as the absolute summit of the mind. This is where you find logic, science, philosophy, all the great books of Western civilization. It's the pinnacle of human intellect. But, and this is a big but, the speaker says it also contains a hidden trap. He calls this trap intellectual narcissism. It's the ego's pride in knowing about a topic. You can quote all the books, you can win any debate, but you're confusing that head knowledge with a true, deep inner understanding. It's knowing the map, but never having actually walked the territory. And that distinction between knowing about something and actually experiencing it, that leads to a totally radical shift in how we understand our own minds and especially the ego. So the speaker completely reframes the ego. It's not this evil thing we need to destroy. He says to think of it more like a primitive but essential survival tool. It evolved over millions of years just to help organisms tell the difference between what's good for it and what's bad for it. It's just a tool for discernment.
So because of that function, the ego's entire view of the world is based on a linear model. It's constantly scanning for problems, for flaws, for things that are incomplete. Its job is to fix things, to move the world from a state of imperfection toward a state of perfection.
But the spiritual vision, it flips this whole idea completely on its head. In this view, nothing is actually broken. Everything is already complete, just moving from one state of perfection to the next. Here's the key idea. This worldview replaces cause and effect with emergence. Think about a rosebud. It isn't an imperfect flower that needs to be fixed. It's a perfect rosebud, being exactly what it's supposed to be in that one moment. It unfolds not because something is wrong with it, but because it's simply fulfilling its own potential. Every single instant is a complete and perfect expression of what is.
And this huge shift in perception is really the core of the path of wisdom. It stops being about doing things to fix the world, and it becomes about a state of being that lets you finally see the world as it truly is.
For anybody walking this path, the speaker offers some really practical advice for telling a true teacher from a false one. A real teacher with integrity shares truth freely, no secrets, no high-priced courses. They want you to be independent, not dependent on them. They teach humility, they warn you about the spiritual ego, and they try to inspire you, never ever to control you.
And this gets to the absolute heart of the whole journey. In this view, the spiritual path is not about gaining something, not enlightenment, not happiness, not a higher score on a chart. It's not about acquiring anything. It's an act of surrender. It's about letting go of all the illusions and all the falsehoods so that the truth of what you already are can finally shine through.
Which leaves us with a final, really profound question to think about. If the world is already a perfect expression of its potential in every single moment, if it's always moving from perfection to perfection, then what is there really for us to do, other than to simply learn how to see it?